fast asleep.
Welcome to Fast Asleep with Gina Marie. And welcome to Classic Short Stories. Thanks for joining us. I'm Gina, and I hope you're in the mood for love. This episode drops on Valentine's Day, you guys, so what choice did we actually have? We just missed Abraham Lincoln's actual birthday. By the way, if any of you have a nice classic story about Abraham Lincoln, our 16th president, I believe, let me know. Maybe we'll use it next year. So, Valentine's Day, actually named after not one, but two Saint Valentines. I personally like the Roman one. According to Good Housekeeping magazine, when Emperor Claudius II decreed that soldiers couldn't marry, Saint Valentine performed their ceremonies anyway, in secret, and Saint Valentine regularly helped people escape from prison. That's how he met and fell in love with the jailer's daughter. He actually started the whole idea of sending your loved one a valentine when he first wrote a letter to his new love declaring his feelings for her and signing it from your Valentine. It caught on, didn't it? We should all do it tonight if we haven't already. It's never too late. We tapped today's author for our recent Christmas story, and here we are, calling on him again for a love story. It's O. Henry, a.k.a. William Sidney Porter. His most famous love story is, of course, The Gift of the Magi, another Christmas story, and actually it is our episode. Oh, it is way back there. That's our episode number 98. Okay. Well, before you hear today's love story, sorry, skippers, you're going to need to give us just another moment or two. Here's a bit of a brush up on O. Henry. And now about O. Henry, did you know he was forced to use his pseudonym? He had to. His name was William Sidney Porter, but he had to use that pseudonym because he started his writing career in prison. How did this well-known novelist, poet, and very prolific writer of short stories get himself into that situation? Well, here's how. William Sidney Porter, known as a nice, unpretentious guy, was born at the peak of the Civil War in North Carolina. And he was licensed as a pharmacist at the young age of 19. He then moved to Texas, where I guess they didn't have pharmacies because he worked on a ranch. And he fell in love, and after marrying this love, and after the birth of their daughter, he took a job as a bank teller. A shortage of $5,000 at the bank was the beginning of real trouble for Mr. Porter. He could never precisely explain the whereabouts of that money. And of course he was accused of embezzlement. The accusation, it was too much for him. He abandoned his wife and child and fled to Honduras. Now, don't think unkindly of him because he returned immediately when he found out about his wife's illness. And he stood trial, and he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. And then his wife died of tuberculosis at just 29. With time off for good behavior, William Porter, now O. Henry, continued the writing career he'd started in prison. Oh, and he carefully guarded his secret. He moved to New York City, where he wrote for several magazines, turning out at least one story per week. He was very successful, but he refused all interviews and all photographs. Now we know why. Despite his popularity, he never really made much money. The stress got to him, and he turned to alcohol. He died at age 47 of cirrhosis of the liver. Today, the O. Henry Award is still given annually to short stories of exceptional merit. No more delays now. It is time for romance. Published in 1906. Tuck in, everybody, for O. Henry's A Service of Love. When one loves one's art, no service seems too hard. That is our premise. This story shall draw a conclusion from it and show at the same time that the premise is incorrect. That will be a new thing in logic and a feat in storytelling, somewhat older than the Great Wall of China. Joe Larrabee came out of the post-oak flats of the Middle West, pulsing with a genius for pictorial art. At 6, he drew a picture of the town pump, with a prominent citizen passing it hastily. This effort was framed and hung in the drugstore window, right by the side of the ear of corn, with an uneven number of rows. At 20, he left for New York with a flowing necktie and a capital tied up somewhat closer. Delia Carruthers did things in 6 octaves so promisingly in a pine tree village in the South, that her relatives chipped in enough in her chip hat for her to go north and finish. They could not see her future, but that is our story. Joe and Delia met in an atelier, a studio, where a number of art and music students had gathered to discuss chiaroscuro, Wagner, music, Rembrandt's works, pictures, Waldteufel, wallpaper, Chopin, and Oolong. Joe and Delia became enamored one of the other, or each of the other, as you please, and in a short time were married. For, as we said earlier, when one loves one's art, no service seems too hard. Mr. and Mrs. Larrabee began housekeeping in a flat. It was a lonesome flat, something like the A sharp, weighed down at the left-hand end of the keyboard. And they were happy, for they had their art, and they had each other, and, well, my advice to the rich young man would be, sell all thou hast, and give it to the poor. Janitor, for the privilege of living in a flat with your art and your Delia. Flat dwellers shall endorse my dictum that theirs is the only true happiness. If a home is happy, it cannot fit too close. Oh, let the dresser collapse and become a billiard table. Let the mantel turn to a rowing machine, the escritoire to a spare bedchamber, the washstand to an upright piano. Let the four walls come together if they will. So you and your Delia are between. But if home be the other kind, oh, let it be wide and long. Enter you at the Golden Gate, hang your hat on Hatteras, your cape on Cape Horn, and go out by the Labrador. Joe was painting in the class of the great Magister. Well, you know his fame. Oh, his fees are high. His lessons are light. His highlights have brought him renown. Delia was studying under Rosenstock. Well, you know his repute as a disturber of the piano keys. They were mighty happy as long as their money lasted. Well, so is every... But I will not be cynical. Their aims were very clear and defined. Joe was to become capable very soon of turning out pictures that old gentlemen with thin side whiskers and thick pocketbooks would sandbag one another in his studio for the privilege of buying. And Delia was to become familiar and then contemptuous with music, so that when she saw the orchestra seats and boxes unsold, well, she could have sore throat and lobster in a private dining room and refuse to go on the stage. But the best, in my opinion, was the home life in the little flat. The ardent, voluble chats after the day's study, the cozy dinners and fresh light breakfasts, the interchange of ambitions interwoven each with the others, or else inconsiderable, the mutual help and inspiration, and overlook my artlessness, stuffed olives and cheese sandwiches at 11 p.m. But after a while, art flagged. It sometimes does, even if some switchman doesn't flag it. Everything going out and nothing coming in, as the vulgarians say. Money was lacking to pay Mr. Magister and Herr Rosenstock their prices. When one loves one's art, no service seems too hard, so Delia said she must give music lessons to keep the chafing dish bubbling. For 2 or 3 days, she went out canvassing for pupils. One evening, she came home elated. "Joe, dear," she said gleefully, "I've a pupil. And oh, the loveliest people. General A.B. Pinckney's daughter, on 71st Street. Oh, such a splendid house, Joe. Well, you ought to see the front door. Byzantine, I think you would call it. And inside, oh, Joe, I never saw anything like it before. My pupil is his daughter Clementina. I dearly love her already. Oh, she's a delicate thing. Dresses always in white, in the sweetest, simplest manners. Only 18 years old. I'm to give 3 lessons a week. And just think, Joe, $5 a lesson. I don't mind it a bit, for when I get 2 or 3 more pupils, I can resume my lessons with Herr Rosenstock. Oh, now, smooth out that wrinkle between your brows, dear, and let's have a nice supper. Oh, that's all right for you, Dealey, said Joe, attacking a can of peas with a carving knife and a hatchet. But how about me? Do you think I'm going to let you hustle for wages while I philander in the regions of high art? Ugh, not by the bones of Benvenuto Cellini. I guess I can sell papers or lay cobblestones and bring in $1 or 2. Delia came and hung about his neck. Oh, Joe, dear, you are silly. You must keep on at your studies. It's not as if I had quit my music and gone to work at something else. While I teach, I learn. I am always with my music, and we can live as happily as millionaires on $15 a week. You mustn't think of leaving, Mr. Magister. All right, said Joe, reaching for the blue scalloped vegetable dish. But I hate for you to be giving lessons. It isn't art. But, oh, you're a trump and a dear to do it. Oh, when one loves one's art, no service seems too hard, said Delia. Stay with me. I'll be right back. Magister praised the sky in that sketch I made in the park, said Joe. And Tinkle gave me permission to hang 2 of them in his window. I may sell one if the right kind of a moneyed idiot sees them. Oh, I'm sure you will, said Delia sweetly. And now, let's be thankful for General Pinckney and this veal roast. During all the next week, the Larrabees had an early breakfast. Joe was enthusiastic about some morning effect sketches he was doing in Central Park, and Delia packed him off breakfast, coddled, praised, and kissed at 7 o'clock. Art is an engaging mistress. It was most times 7 o'clock when he returned in the evenings. At the end of the week, Delia, sweetly proud, but languid, triumphantly tossed 3 $5 bills on the 8 by 10 inches center table of the 8 by 10 feet flat parlor. "Sometimes," she said, a little wearily, "Clementina tries me. I'm afraid she doesn't practice enough, and I have to tell her the same thing so often. And then she always dresses entirely in white, and that does get monotonous. But General Pinckney is the dearest old man. I wish you could know him, Joe. He comes in sometimes when I am with Clementina at the piano. He's a widower, you know, and he stands there pulling his white goatee and—"
How are the semiquavers? And the demi-semiquavers progressing?
he always asks, referring, of course, to the 16th and 32nd notes. I wish you could see the wainscoting in that drawing room, Joe, and those Astrakhan rug Poitiers. And Clementina, well, you know, she has such a funny little cough. I hope she is stronger than she looks. Oh, I really am getting attached to her. She's so gentle and high-bred. General Pinckney's brother was once minister to Bolivia. And then Joe, with the air of a Monte Cristo, drew forth a 10, a 5, a 2, and a 1, all legal tender notes, and laid them beside Delia's earnings. I sold that watercolor of the obelisk to a man from Peoria, he announced, overwhelmingly. Oh, now don't you joke with me, said Delia. Not from Peoria. All the way. I wish you could see him, Delie. Fat man with a woolen muffler and a quill toothpick. He saw the sketch in Tinkle's window and thought it was a windmill at first. He was game, though. He bought it anyhow. He ordered another, an oil sketch of the Lackawanna Freight Depot, to take back with him. Music lessons. Oh, I guess art is still in it. Oh, I'm so glad you've kept on, said Delia heartily. You're bound to win, dear. $33. Why, we've never had so much to spend before. We'll have oysters tonight. And filet mignon with champignon mushrooms, said Joe. Oh, now where is the olive fork? On the next Saturday evening, Joe reached home first. He spread his $18 on the parlor table and washed what seemed to be a great deal of dark paint from his hands. Half an hour later, Delia arrived, her right hand tied up in a shapeless bundle of wraps and bandages. How is this? Asked Joe after the usual greetings. Delia laughed, but not very joyously. Clementina, she explained. She insisted upon a Welsh rabbit after her lesson. Oh, she is such a queer girl. Welsh rabbits at 5 in the afternoon. The general was there. Oh, you should have seen him run for the chafing dish, Joe. just as if there wasn't a servant in the house. Now I know Clementina isn't in good health. She is so nervous. In serving the rabbit, well, she spilled a great lot of it, boiling hot, over my hand and wrist. It hurt awfully, Joe. And the dear girl was so sorry. Oh, but General Pinckney, Joe, that old man nearly went distracted. He rushed downstairs and sent somebody, they said the furnace man or somebody in the basement, out to a drugstore for some oil and things to bind it up with. It doesn't hurt so much now. "What's this?" asked Joe, taking the hand tenderly and pulling at some white strands beneath the bandages. "Oh, it's something soft," said Delia, "that had oil on it. Oh, Joe, did you sell another sketch?" She had seen the money on the table. "Did I?" said Joe. "Just ask the man from Peoria. He got his depot today, and he isn't sure, but he thinks. He wants another parkscape and a view on the Hudson." "What time this afternoon did you burn your hand, Delie?" "Oh, 5 o'clock, I think," said Delie plaintively. The rabbit came off the fire about that time. You ought to have seen General Pinckney, Joe, and sit down here a moment, Delie," said Joe. He drew her to the couch, sat her beside him, and put his arm across her shoulders. "What have you been doing for the last 2 weeks?" he asked. Oh, she braved it for a moment or two, with an eye full of love and stubbornness, and murmured a phrase or two vaguely of General Pinckney, but at length down went her head, and out came the truth and tears. I couldn't get any pupils," she confessed, "and I couldn't bear to have you give up your lessons, and I got a place ironing shirts in that big 24th Street laundry, and I think I did very well to make up both General Pinckney and Clementina, don't you, Joe? And when a girl in the laundry set down a hot iron on my hand this afternoon, well, I was all the way home making up that story about the Welsh rabbit. You're not angry, are you, Joe? And if I hadn't got the work, you mightn't have sold your sketches to that man from Peoria." He wasn't from Peoria," said Joe, slowly. "Well, it doesn't matter where he was from. Oh, how clever you are, Joe, and kiss me, Joe. And what made you ever suspect that I wasn't giving music lessons to Clementina?" "Well, I didn't," said Joe, "until tonight. And I wouldn't have then, only I sent up this cotton waste and oil from the engine room this afternoon for a girl upstairs who had her hand burned with a smoothing iron. I've been firing the engine in that laundry for the last 2 weeks." "And then you didn't?" "My purchaser from Peoria," said Joe, "and General Pinckney or both, creations of the same art. Oh, but you wouldn't call it either painting or music. And then they both laughed. And Joe began, "Well, when one loves one's art, no service seems..." Delia stopped him with her hand on his lips. "No," she said, "just when one loves." Happy Valentine's Day to you and those you love. Introduction information comes from Louis Menand, author of Are All Short Stories O. Henry Stories? From The New Yorker, and other sources in our show notes. Music for this episode is This Place is a Shelter from Olafur Arnalds. Earnestly Yours from Keaton Henson with Ren Ford. And Quartet Number 3 from Dustin O'Halloran. We really do like hearing from you. Right here in comments, or you can always email us at fastasleep44@gmail.com, or reach us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. It's definitely your reviews, likes, comments, and subscriptions that keep us here for you. Thank you so much for listening. Keyword: Peoria. Next week, a very wintry Jack London tale.